Good evening and welcome to the channel's studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. At least 65 people have been killed in a huge fire that engulfed multiple high-rise buildings in Hong Kong, the city's deadliest blaze in more than 70 years. Some residents remain trapped inside the buildings, with more than 270 people unaccounted for, while 70 people have been injured. Hundreds of firefighters have been tackling the blaze, which is now largely under control at all of the affected buildings in Wong Fuk Court. The housing complex had been undergoing extensive renovations when the fire began. The exact cause is unclear, but police say materials on outside of the buildings may have facilitated its spread. 3 construction company executives have been arrested on suspicion of manslaughter and gross negligence.
Debris and scaffolding of the affected buildings are falling down, so pose additional danger to our frontline personnel. Besides, the temperature inside the buildings concerned are very high, so it's quite difficult for us to enter the building and go upstairs to conduct firefighting and rescue operation.
The US has suspended processing all immigration requests from Afghans after an Afghan man was identified as the suspect in the shooting of 2 National Guard soldiers near the White House. The US Citizenship and Immigration Services said the decision was made pending a review of security and vetting protocols. The suspect of Wednesday's shooting, which left 2 National Guard members critically injured, is said to have arrived in the US from Afghanistan in September 2021. US President Donald Trump said the attack was an act of terror, adding that he would take steps to remove foreigners from any country who does not belong here.
This attack underscores the single greatest national security threat facing our nation. The last administration let in 20 million unknown and unvetted foreigners from all over the world, from places that you don't want to even know about. No country can tolerate such a risk to our very survival.
A limited form of military service will be reintroduced in France in response to growing fears of a confrontation with Russia. More than 25 years after conscription was phased out, the plan will see young men and women volunteering for a paid 10 months military training. The new national service will be brought in gradually from next summer, mainly for 18 and 19-year-olds who will receive at least $800 a month. An army general has been sworn in as Guinea-Bissau's new head of state a day after an apparent coup. General Horta Tam becomes the transitional president for a period of 1 year. He took the oath on Thursday in brief and muted proceedings in army headquarters. The military had already suspended the electoral process and blocked the release of the results of Sunday's presidential election, which were expected on Thursday. Some civil society groups in Guinea-Bissau have accused outgoing President Umaro Sissoco Embalo of masterminding a simulated coup against himself, with the help of the military, saying it was a ruse to block election results from coming out in case he loses. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has described as regrettable the announcement by US President Donald Trump that South Africa would not be invited to take part in next year's G20 summit in Florida. In a social media post, Trump said South Africa had refused to hand over the G20 presidency to a US embassy representative at last week's summit in Johannesburg. Members of the G20, a gathering of the world's biggest economies, do not need an invite but can possibly be barred through visa restrictions. Pope Leo XIV has arrived in Turkey at the start of the first foreign trip of his papacy, where he will mark an historic Christian anniversary before heading to Lebanon days after Israeli airstrikes on its capital, Beirut. As he travelled to Ankara, the Pope summed up the message of his trip by saying that all men, women can be truly brothers and sisters in spite of differences, in spite of different religions, in spite of different beliefs. Visits to both countries had originally been planned by the late Pope Francis, but the overarching theme, building bridges, is one Pope Leo has made his own from the moment he stepped on to the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica after his election. And many Thanksgiving travellers across the US are experiencing a white holiday as a winter storm leaves behind a fresh blanket of snow. In the Midwest, blizzard conditions have led to hazardous road collisions. Winter storm alerts and hazardous weather outlooks have been issued for parts of Michigan, Minnesota, Montana, North Dakota and Wisconsin. Another storm is expected on the 29th of November, which will bring additional snowfall to western and central states. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the channel's studios in Lagos.